welcome to another in the series of Café Insights. I'm Andrew Vine, the founder and CEO of the Insight Bureau, and today I'm in conversation with Dominic Ziegler from The Economist. How are you doing?
I'm very well, Andrew. Good to see you again.
Great to see you again. Well, Dominic is the senior Asia correspondent with The Economist. He writes the Banyan column each week, and he's one of the few foreign correspondents of a major news organisation actually based in the region now, so great to see you. What are you up to these days? You're in Singapore for just this week?
I'm in Singapore this week partly to look at a problem that a lot of countries have, which is how do governments deal with the issue of fake news.
Oh, right, okay. Yes.
Singapore has passed legislation, POFMA, which is quite extreme by the standards of many democracies. But of course it's very, very relevant now because not only is fake news contagious, but so is the coronavirus.
Exactly.
And some of the fake news that the Singaporean government is worried about is precisely how false rumours might spread about the virus and indeed create panic.
Well, I mean, you spend all of your time pretty much on the road around Asia. The whole point is to be the finger on the pulse of Asia and its key developments. We were talking for the last time about the China trade war and Trump and his antics. We were talking about then of course we were faced with Hong Kong's crisis of the protests. We're also concerned a little bit about China flexing its muscles in the region. But all of these issues at the moment are eclipsed, of course, by the coronavirus, which has broken out in Wuhan just recently, and we're still getting to grips with what this really means. But it's clear that this is a world problem, not just a China problem. But you're closest to China, sitting there in Hong Kong most of the time. How worried should we be about this, and how does it fit into the big scheme?
Well, I'm not in a position, not being an expert, to give you a sense of how worried we should be about the virus itself. And at this stage, it's early days, isn't it? And we still don't have a sense of how this virus will spread, how virulent it will become, and for how many countries it will be a big problem. But it's already clear to me that the virus has a huge impact on several dimensions. First of all, in the case of China, it is the most severe challenge to Xi Jinping, the president for life. He has had developed around him an extraordinary personality cult for which he gets credit for everything good that China does. But of course, by the same token, he will be blamed for anything that goes wrong. This is a challenge. The biggest challenge for him until the outbreak of the coronavirus was Hong Kong and the protests there. In a way, the virus has magnified the crisis in Hong Kong for China. And indeed, pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong have used the outbreak as a further way to beat up on the government of Hong Kong under Carrie Lam. They have, for instance, demanded that she close the border. She's under increasing pressure to do that, despite the certain displeasure from Beijing if that happens. So it's an example of how all these things play one into another. One thing that has become clear to me here in Singapore, in conversations here with government and business people, is that no matter how long or short the outbreak of this virus remains a crisis, it's already affecting the thinking of businesses in the region. Bear in mind that these businesses were already thinking about what the impact of their business models is of US-China trade tensions.
Yes. Well, we're typically worried that anything that shakes China's growth numbers, already slightly alarmed that perhaps it's lower than thought was going to be healthy, and now one thing after another seems to be denting those numbers.
Again, of course, if this is a short-lived epidemic, then to a certain extent the economic costs can be contained. But I wouldn't underestimate the economic impact in the short term. I flew over the sea areas south of Hong Kong the other day, and below were dozens and dozens of empty container ships, cargo vessels, anchored without freight to pick up in China. So the whole global supply chain seems to, for now at least, to have snapped. Growth in China is certainly likely to slow quite sharply. And as I say, I think it's already having an impact on the thinking of businesses that have operations in China. They've already been hedging by moving operations to other parts of Asia. Now they'll revisit again the risks of having too many eggs in the China basket.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, there's been one thing after another that has raised this question mark about whether China is just too important. There's been this question mark about whether there's too much risk associated with putting all your eggs in one basket, as you just said, with China. But where else can you diversify your interests when you've got a huge market the way China is and its dominance and its growing influence in the world? You just can't decouple from China that easily.
Well, a couple of years ago, as US-China trade tensions were rising, some businesses were relocating at least some of their manufacturing to nearby countries in Southeast Asia, in particular Vietnam. But, now with the coronavirus, even Vietnam looks too close for comfort. So my guess is that the debate in boardrooms in the coming months is about how to build resilience into global supply chains. Now, that may play to President Trump's advantage. His administration has been urging American businesses to come home. Well, I suspect that kind of trend, and not just for America, but for Europe too, will accelerate.
I mean, you've been spending a lot of your time looking at China from the outside more than from the inside in a way, but China and its influence in the world and how it's been developing its footprint across Belt and Road, for example, which is really very, very wide. And it's actually the focus of one of your most recent special reports, the Belt and Road.
Yes, it's out today. I spent quite a bit of time traveling, much of the world to try to get a sense of China's place in the world. So yes, it's about the Belt and Road Initiative, this great infrastructure connectivity scheme that President Xi Jinping launched in 2013. It's since become really a sort of rattlebag for anything China is doing overseas. Everything's been lumped into this bucket of the Belt and Road Initiative. And my travels took me to the Pacific, to Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Ethiopia, Greece. And the conclusions I came away with were several. One is that the infrastructure spending is for real. It's not always clear to see because there's a lot of chaos, a lot of unplanned stuff around Belt and Road, a lot of things that are labeled Belt and Road projects that don't really deserve to be. But there is real infrastructure spending going on, financed by China. It's not a house of cards, as the Trump administration sometimes claims. A broader conclusion that I came to is that Belt and Road is the way China thinks it can bend the world bit by bit to its will. That the branding aspect of it, the political aspect of it, is as important as the hard stuff that's getting built. That this is a way for China to say, look, aren't we great? Aren't we generous? Aren't we peace-loving? And then when it gets leaders to sign up to that idea of China, other countries' leaders, then President Xi turns around to his own people and says, look, here comes the world to pay us tribute.
And arguably a collaborative way of expanding their footprint by inviting participation from governments and international organizations and finance the world to actually build this together.
China absolutely emphasizes the collaboration, and it talks about, win-win mutual cooperation. The Silk Road spirit is all about cooperation, but it is on China's terms. If you question the Silk Road spirit, then you're questioning the cosmos. And you're sanctioned for it. You're punished for it.
Well, it's great. I mean, you're one of the people, I think, that do a very difficult job of actually joining the dots between all of these things. In isolation, you can talk about what's happening with various developments in the world, but to join the dots and help us understand how it all fits together is crucial.
Well, I'm very lucky in being able to travel for The Economist and ask people questions. I have to say that what leaders in Southeast Asian countries say in private about China is rather different what they say in public.
So just to finish off then, I mean, we know we live in an ever-changing, volatile world full of risk, but what are you worried about beyond coronavirus? Let's just take that as a given now because we have no idea. It's a wild card. But beyond the virus, what are the other things that we should be concerned about in the region?
Well, I mean, it used to be that geopolitical risk wasn't something that one can or should plan for, but I think, over the last 2 or 3 years, such risk has come right to the fore. We have this enormous sort of struggle for supremacy between the US and China, which in Asia is sort of shifting the tectonic plates. And in a way, many things, including the virus, play into this dynamic in ways that aren't always predictable. But I think that is going to be to the fore for a good long time to come. There are other aspects that possibly in this part of the world we're underplaying, but which the Australian bushfires have given us a sort of hint of, and that's the environmental stresses that we're placing in this region. This region is particularly vulnerable to climate change. Very large megacities perched at sea level. The impact of global warming and rising sea levels will have a profound impact here in Southeast Asia.
Very interesting times, which is a curse in some ways. But thank you very much for the time you spent with us, Dominic.
Thank you, Andrew.
Great to see you again. See you soon.
Good to see you.